You weren't a hero. Just some dusty old man wasting bar space. That's what the bartender said, loud, smug, and sharp enough to draw laughter from the corners of the room, just moments before everything changed. The drink hadn't even dried on his face when the front door opened, and history walked in. Not dressed in medals or glory, but in silence. A reckoning cloaked in humility. Before the fists. Before the shouting. Before broken chairs and scattered apologies. There was a man who didn't flinch. He had sat still, steady, like someone who'd seen worse in 100 unnamed towns where the maps ran out. And if you believe dignity doesn't come with an expiration date, especially not for those who carried it into battle, then listen close. This story doesn't start with noise. It begins with silence. He was already sitting there when the comment was made. Not hunched, not ashamed. Just quiet. Quiet like cold water, like the weight of a folded flag. And the bartender, Trey, never noticed. Or didn't care. Either way, that moment, those wrong words, spread across the room like oil on concrete. Laughter came next. Predictable. From the booths and the barstools, from mouths that had never tasted sandstorms or steel rain. It wasn't cruel, exactly. Just careless. And that's often worse. Outside, the wind shifted. The neon sign above the door buzzed twice, then steadied. The kind of night where nothing should matter, but everything did. He wiped the drink from his brow without a word. No flash of anger. No demand. Just a quiet glance toward the jukebox, still playing that same tired country song. Then he stood. And the hush that followed was the beginning of a lesson that none of them would forget. Because what walked into Kenny's tap room that night wasn't just a man. It was the ghost of 1,000 unspoken stories. And one of them was about to be told. It was a Tuesday night, drizzling over Route 27. Kenny's tap room flickered between a dying neon sign and the rusted frame of a long-closed auto garage. The kind of place where regulars drank to forget and newcomers were either tested or ignored. Inside, the music was low, the whiskey warm, and the sarcasm thick enough to coat the walls. He walked in just after sundown. The rain didn't touch him, or if it did, it didn't dare stay. His jacket was military green, soft-collared, with a recon patch stitched above the heart, faded like a memory too old for telling. His name was Nathaniel Rourke, though nobody knew that yet. Not Trey behind the bar, not the three men hunched over a game of dice, not the couple arguing softly in the corner. Not even Lena Morales, though she'd come to know more than most by the end of the night. Rourke didn't order alcohol. Just water. With lime. Trey, the bartender, young, loud, and full of the confidence that comes from not knowing any better, snorted and slid it across the bar. One fancy water for the silent type, he muttered, sarcasm swallowed by the next round of jukebox blues. Rourke didn't respond. Just nodded once in thanks, hands still and scarred, resting like they'd done that in other cities, other decades. They were hands made to hold weight, rifles, shoulders, bodies, secrets. Not glasses. 2 stools down, a couple of drunks leaned in toward each other and laughed. Probably salutes his microwave, one snorted. Bet he still calls it the mission, the other added. But Rourke was unmoved. Calm like stone. Not insulted, unreachable. And it was that calm, that immovable nerve, that made Trey snap. The kind of person who couldn't stomach his jokes falling flat. With a smirk, he grabbed a cranberry soda from under the bar, filled a pint glass to the brim, and without a word, hurled it directly into Rourke's face. Red, white, and blue, Trey said with a mock salute. There's your damn tribute. The glass didn't break. But the moment did. Silence fell hard. The jukebox kept playing, but no one heard it anymore. Chairs scraped. Breaths caught. Even the laughter died, smothered under the weight of what had just happened. Rourke stood slowly. Soda dripping down his face, down his windbreaker. Still, he didn't speak. Didn't lift a hand. He just turned, walked past the stunned crowd, and disappeared into the restroom without a backward glance. It wasn't fear that followed him, it was awe. Like watching a glacier move. Everyone saw it, and nobody could quite process what they'd witnessed. At the far end of the bar, near the emergency exit, a woman stood. She wore light blue scrubs, dog tags tucked beneath the collar. Her ponytail was neat, no nonsense. She moved like someone who knew how to walk fast through chaos. Her name was Lena Morales. Trauma medic. Ex-Army. Night shift nurse at St. Ignatius, about 5 blocks down. She stared at the door Rourke had vanished through for a moment. Then, without a word, she followed him. Behind the bar, Trey gave a short, humorless laugh. "Well, I guess I'm buying him a towel." But the air didn't laugh with him. It was dense now. Weighted with something unspoken. A minute passed. 2. Then Lena returned. Her eyes weren't the same. Her mouth was tight, her posture different, straighter, sharper. She walked up to the bar and looked Trey dead in the eye. "You don't know who that is," she said. Trey raised an eyebrow. "Sure I do." Sad old vet. Lost in his own fog. Lena didn't blink. "That man's not lost. That man is Sergeant Major Nathaniel Rourke." The name fell into the bar like a dropped glass. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then, near the pool table, an older man with weathered skin and salt and pepper hair stood slowly. Marine tattoos coiled down both arms. A single tear of ink traced the edge of his eye socket. "My CO owed his life to a Sergeant Major Rourke," the man said. "Kandahar. 2007. He turned to the teenage boy sitting beside him. "His son. Get your coat." The boy frowned. "Why?" "Because you don't sit still while that man's disrespected." At the bar, Trey laughed nervously. "You're all seriously buying this? It's just a name. Could be coincidence. Could be a story." But then the door creaked open again. And in stepped Colonel Isaac Sawyer. No fanfare. No uniform. Just a trench coat, iron gray hair, and the posture of a man who never forgot how to stand at attention. He moved with purpose, scanning the bar. His eyes found Rourke's empty stool, the dripping glass, the faint pink stain on the wood. Then he looked at Trey. "You just threw a drink on a man whose name is carved into the walls of more than one base," he said. "Apologize. Before the room remembers what honor feels like." Trey rolled his eyes. "And what are you, his lawyer?" Sawyer stepped forward. "No," he said calmly. "I'm the man who signed off on his 3rd Distinguished Service Cross." You could feel it then. That shifting current. The weight of history filling the room, invisible but undeniable. And in that moment, even the drunkest fool began to sober. The jukebox clicked. Fell silent. And no one dared press play. The name dropped like a shell casing on concrete. It echoed. Not in volume, but in meaning, quiet and final, like the moment before thunder. The room shifted, small adjustments rippling through a dozen bodies, as if everyone had instinctively straightened their backs. Near the pool table, the older Marine's son blinked. 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, he asked, as if trying to do the math out loud. "Do you even know what it takes to get one?" his father muttered. "Most don't live through earning one." Trey's smirk faltered, but ego is a stubborn thing. "Oh, come on," he said too loudly. "You're telling me some guy walks in with a patch and a scowl, orders water, and suddenly he's Captain America?" Sawyer turned toward him, expression unchanged. "You think valor has a uniform?" he asked. You think men like Rourke need parades and salutes to prove what they've done? No answer. Just Trey swallowing hard, realizing he might be the only one in the room not caught up in a shift he no longer controlled. Across the bar, someone stood. A man in his early 40s, hair cut tight, knuckles scarred from old fights. He pulled up his sleeve to reveal a recon unit tattoo, just below a long-healed burn scar. Arctic Survival School, 2002, he said. Rourke taught us how to dig our own graves, in case we had to sleep in them. A stunned silence. He didn't smile. Didn't shout. Just made sure we came out stronger than we went in. My buddy lost 2 toes to frostbite. Rourke carried him down the ice cliff when the evac chopper was late. Another voice, younger, from the side booth. I saw him in Mosul. I was just a private. He was already a legend. A woman with cropped gray hair stepped out from the shadows near the dartboard. She wore a leather jacket, pinched tight at the collar, and boots that had seen more than dance floors. Fallujah, she said. He pulled my husband out from a burning MRAP. Never even told us his name. And just like that, the story grew legs. Became a river, cold, fast, undeniable. Back near the bar, Trey's hand hovered awkwardly above the soda glass he'd thrown. As if he could somehow undo the motion that started it all. Lena stood beside him now, arms crossed. You think we wear dog tags for decoration? She said. You think war leaves you when the uniform comes off? Trey's jaw tightened. I didn't mean anything. But you did, Lena snapped. You meant disrespect. You meant to belittle someone quieter than you because silence scares you. The door to the restroom creaked open. Rourke emerged. He wasn't dripping anymore. His hair was damp. His face clean. But something in his eyes had sharpened, not with anger, but purpose. He walked with the same stillness he'd carried in. Sat at the same stool. Placed the lime-sliced glass aside, untouched. He looked at no one in particular, yet the entire room felt watched. Trey swallowed. Tried to break the tension with levity. Okay. Look, I was just messing around. Rourke raised a hand. Flat. Calm. A quiet signal that cut the bartender off better than any shout. Colonel Sawyer stepped forward and laid a folded sheet of paper gently on the bar next to the untouched glass. His third citation, he said, voice now for the crowd. He dragged a downed medic 5 miles through hostile fire in Marja. Gave his rifle to a wounded private. Fought with a sidearm until it jammed. Then used his fists. Murmurs swirled around the bar. Some gasped. Others just stared. Trey leaned in to look at the paper but didn't touch it. Not now. How was I supposed to know, he muttered. Because men like him don't announce themselves, Lena said. They don't boast. They don't demand attention. They carry it. Quietly. Until someone pushes too far. By now, Rourke had said nothing. Still hadn't spoken since the insult. His restraint was louder than a roar. More powerful than anything Trey had thrown his way. And yet, this wasn't about Trey anymore. It was about the mirror he'd held up. Others were standing now. A retired MP leaned forward. Rourke kept us together in Helmand. When comms dropped and the drones pulled back, he taught us how to listen to wind patterns. Said silence would save us. He was right. A quiet man near the jukebox nodded. I saw him carry a wounded interpreter for 2 kilometers. Then hand over his own boots. Walked barefoot the rest of the mission. The stories piled up like ammunition. Not in anger, but in recognition. Trey finally stepped back from the bar, visibly smaller than he'd been an hour earlier. I didn't know, he repeated, helplessly now. You didn't ask, Sawyer said. Because asking takes humility. And you thought you owned this place. Lena walked around the bar, picked up the glass, and set it beside the citation. Sergeant Major Rourke didn't come here for recognition, she said. He came for peace. You robbed him of that. Rourke looked up then. Just once. Just long enough to meet Trey's eyes. He didn't frown. He didn't nod. He just looked. Like a man reading a page in a book he'd seen too many times. Then he looked away again. Back to the bar. Back to the glass. And that was worse than fury. It was dismissal. A verdict. Unspoken, but irreversible. The neon above the bar buzzed in confusion, casting off a flickering light like it couldn't decide what kind of night it wanted to be. Inside, the mood teetered between tension and reverence. Trey stood stiff behind the bar, like a child told to wait in the corner after breaking a family heirloom. Only now, he was starting to understand what he'd shattered. The room, once filled with routine noise, dice rattling, darts hitting wood, casual insults traded with beers, had been replaced with silence that listened. Not just quiet, but reverent, strained, anticipatory. Someone finally moved. From the shadowy edge of the bar, a former combat engineer stepped forward. Barrel-chested, buzz-cut silvering, sleeves pushed up to reveal a recon insignia. He looked at Rourke like a man seeing a ghost, or a legend. I was in the 75th, he said, voice gravelly but steady. You trained our Arctic survival unit in Fairbanks. Taught us to dig wind shelters with our helmets. You said, cold don't kill fast. It kills quiet. Listen for it. We didn't understand then. We do now. Rourke didn't reply. He didn't need to. The man just nodded at him, a gesture that passed 1,000 words between soldiers without speaking a single one. From the back booth, a kid in a patched leather jacket shifted uncomfortably. Then stood. He looked barely 20, face still soft under the stubble. Nervous. But there was something in his eyes, resolve. My dad wore this, he said, holding out a worn chain with dog tags dangling from it. Said a man gave it to him after pulling him out of a field hospital overrun by hostiles in Anbar. Said he owed him everything. Never told me who. Not until he saw the name on that citation. He stepped forward and laid the tags beside the citation. Said if I ever saw him again, should say 2 things, thank you. And sorry we never knew sooner. Rourke didn't look at the tags. He didn't move. But something in his stillness softened, barely. A subtle shift. The kind a soldier makes when a comrade touches a nerve they've buried deep. Near the door, the 2 off-duty MPs that Lena had quietly texted earlier leaned in against the wall. Uniform pants, civilian jackets. But their posture was unmistakable, alert, ready. No one had asked them to step in yet. No one needed to. Then the mood snapped. Trey reached toward the paper. Not to destroy it, at least, not intentionally. Maybe it was to take it back. Maybe it was to reclaim a sense of control he had long since lost. But the moment his fingers touched the corner of the citation, the room changed again. A fist slammed the bar. Not Rourke's. The Marine Dad's. Enough, he said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Trey recoiled, hand jerking back like it had touched a burner. He was red-faced now. Embarrassed, cornered. Still trying to pretend he was the victim of a prank gone too far. I didn't throw a punch, he muttered. I didn't do anything wrong. You threw disrespect, Lena snapped, stepping around the bar. Same thing. And you did it loud enough for the whole room to hear it. Trey squared his shoulders, suddenly indignant again. I said I was sorry. But then he made the mistake, the one that snapped the dam open. He shoved the Marine Dad. It wasn't hard. It wasn't violent. But it was enough. Enough for the man's son to step forward. Enough for the MPs to tense. Enough for everyone else to remember why they didn't sit quietly when one of their own was insulted. The Marine didn't retaliate. He didn't need to. Others stood. A retired MP, bald and barrel-shaped, moved beside him. That man kept us alive when our radios died and our hope ran out. A female sergeant, maybe late 50s, glasses perched on her nose, stood from the booth and pushed up her sleeve to reveal an old scar. He got us through a 2-day standoff in Ghazni. He carried my brother's body out under mortar fire. Never even told me his name. The stories kept coming, stacking like sandbags against the tide of Trey's fading arrogance. And in the center of it all, Rourke sat, still silent, the eye of the storm. Colonel Sawyer leaned across the bar now, gaze locked onto Trey. You thought this was a place where words didn't matter. Where silence meant weakness. You never imagined silence might be a shield. Or a warning. Trey's voice cracked, all false confidence gone. Why didn't he say something? Lena turned. Because men like him already said enough in places you'll never go. They screamed in foxholes, whispered last rites, held tourniquets on dying kids who looked like your age. And when they came home, they didn't bring the war with them. But you just invited it in. One of the off-duty MPs stepped forward, folding his arms. We're not here to cause trouble, he said calmly. But if you lay a hand on anyone else, we'll escort you out. Trey looked around. No allies. No laughter. Just the weight of dozens of people who understood something he never had. He sank back behind the bar, defeated. Lena stepped forward and gently picked up the citation. Wiped the edge clean. She walked over to Rourke and set it in front of him. People like you don't ask for respect, she said. But sometimes the world needs to give it anyway. Rourke looked down at the paper. Then back at her. Still silent. But this time, he nodded. Slow. Grateful. Sawyer turned to the bar crowd. This place, he said, isn't just a bar. It's a resting stop. For stories. For scars. For people who walked through hell and didn't ask for thanks, just peace. You either honor that, or you find a new place to drink. No one argued. No one even moved. Because for the first time, they understood. That silence had never meant absence. It had meant presence. Heavy. Earned. Sacred. No one touched the jukebox. No one touched their drinks. The bar held its breath as if waiting for some ancient verdict to be spoken aloud, but none came. Rourke remained seated, expression neutral, eyes cast downward like a man listening to something deeper than voices, memories, perhaps, or ghosts. Across the room, a man in a gray hoodie stood up. He was tall, broad, with the posture of someone who didn't need to announce himself to be taken seriously. He pulled the hoodie up slightly to reveal a faded insignia beneath, a black dagger stitched into tan cloth. Second Recon, Bravo Company, he said. He saved our rear unit in Mosul. Blackout Op. We lost our thermal imaging gear, got caught between walls with no satellite eyes and no comms. He found us with nothing but moonlight and a hand-sketched map. Didn't lose a man. He looked around the room, eyes lingering on Trey, then lowered the hoodie. My son was 4 then. Didn't know who saved his father. Now he does. The boy standing beside him stepped forward. Not more than 12, maybe 13. Skinny, serious, too old in the eyes for someone so young. He wore a thin chain around his neck and held out what dangled from it. Dog tags. Old, scratched. Issued to someone who'd earned them in dirt. He gave these to my dad, the boy said. Said it was to remind him not to be afraid of the dark. Now I wear them. He walked over, reverently placed the tags on the bar beside the citation and water glass, and stepped back. Not a word more. Trey stood behind the counter, hands clenched at his sides, trying to understand how the walls around him had closed in so quickly. How a single moment of smugness had summoned ghosts from places he'd only ever seen on movie screens. Another patron rose. Older, thick glasses, baritone voice that rumbled from deep in the chest. "Military police," he said. "Retired now. Afghanistan, 2009. Our Humvee got separated during a dust storm. 2 vehicles lost. No comms. Rourke wasn't even part of our command. He just appeared out of nowhere. Took command. Used terrain mapping to find high ground. We thought he was some hallucination." He chuckled dryly. Not the first time Death got outmaneuvered. By the time he sat down, more people were standing. Not to speak. Just to show they remembered. That he mattered. Lena turned to Trey. "This wasn't about drinks. It was about what you served with your words. You poured disrespect with a smirk and thought nobody would notice." Trey raised his voice, desperate to claw back any sense of control. "It was a joke. Jesus, people make jokes." "No," Colonel Sawyer replied, his tone cold and sharp, "people make choices. That was yours. Own it." For a moment, Trey's pride sparked again. And like a drowning man who kicks against the tide, he reached, too fast, too angry, for the citation once more. But this time, he didn't get the chance. A heavy hand grabbed his wrist and slammed it flat against the bar. Not Rourke's. The Marine Dad's. "Touch it again," the man said, "and you'll be explaining it to everyone who ever saluted a flag." The air snapped. Trey tried to shove back, panic rising. But it was over before it started. 2 more veterans closed in. Not charging. Not brawling. Just moving with quiet, terrifying purpose. The kind of men who didn't need noise to be dangerous. One took Trey's shoulder. Another stepped between him and the bar, body wide enough to cast a shadow. "You made a mistake," the taller man said. "You mocked silence. And now you're surrounded by people who remember why silence kept them alive." Trey shoved again, reflex, not courage. A chair skidded. A woman's hand caught a falling beer glass before it hit the ground. And then the boots moved. The off-duty MPs, stationed near the door, stepped forward. Calm. Professional. One reached for the radio on his shoulder but didn't press it. He didn't need to. Their presence was enough. "Trey," Lena warned, "you're one swing away from ending your career in customer service with a concussion." Trey froze. Eyes flicked around the room. Everyone was standing. Everyone had chosen their side. And his wasn't the one getting stronger. But the room didn't descend into chaos. No punches thrown. No tables flipped. It wasn't a bar fight. It was a reckoning. Trey's chest heaved. He pointed at Rourke. He didn't even say anything. All this, he didn't say a damn word. And that's when Colonel Sawyer finally stepped forward and placed a hand gently on the bar. "Exactly," he said. "That's what scares you most. That everything you tried to tear down held firm without a single word of defense." The entire bar stood still, holding to that truth. "You tried to break a mountain with noise," Lena added. "Didn't work." Trey opened his mouth. Then closed it. He slumped backward, retreating behind the bar like a dog crawling beneath the porch. Sawyer turned to the gathered patrons. "This isn't about revenge," he said. "This is about remembering that some men carry things that weigh more than any insult." Then he looked at Rourke, whose expression hadn't changed. Still calm. Still silent. "You don't have to stay," he said to him. "We'll handle the cleanup." But Rourke shook his head. One small motion. "No?" Lena asked softly. Rourke turned just slightly toward the bartender. For the first time, he looked at Trey, not as an accuser, not with rage. Just a man seeing something broken. I didn't come here to fight, he said. The first words all night. Quiet. Gravel-lined. Everyone froze. I came here for peace, he continued. But if I have to teach it first, so be it. He turned back to his drink. And Trey said nothing. Because sometimes, one sentence is more devastating than 1,000 shouts. Glass had not shattered. No one had bled. And yet, the walls of Kenny's tap room bore witness to a deeper fracture, one that didn't crack from fists, but from the weight of truth. The kind of weight that silence drags into a room and drops with finality. Rourke didn't stand. He didn't need to. He sat with the gravity of mountains, and the room revolved around him. The jukebox lights blinked like the machine was holding its breath too. No one dared press a button. Near the dartboard, a young woman stepped forward. Civilian clothes, but with posture like steel. Her sleeves rolled back to show a small airborne insignia on one arm and a pale, puckered scar on the other. Firebase Raptor, she said softly. 2010, the medevac bird didn't make it. We had 6 wounded, 1 Kia, no backup. We thought it was over. And then Rourke walked out of the dust. Carried 2 of them, carried them, half a mile under fire. Stayed behind for the last man. Told me to take point. I asked him why. She swallowed. He said, because you're still afraid. That makes you careful. I'll cover you. She looked at him now, not like a ghost, not even a hero, but like someone who had granted her life, and expected nothing in return. Rourke didn't look at her. But his silence grew deeper. Colonel Sawyer's voice followed next. You see it now, don't you? He said to no one in particular. This isn't a legend. This isn't some bar story. This is flesh and blood, right here in front of you. He pointed to the folded citation still resting on the bar. You mocked a man who never asked to be known, but who could walk into any base in this country and never pay for his own drink again. Trey stood frozen behind the bar, eyes wide but no longer defiant. Something had cracked in him, too. Maybe pride. Maybe ignorance. Maybe the illusion of his own importance. Lena stepped forward now, not aggressive, just firm. Steady. I've scrubbed blood off walls. Held lungs together with my bare hands. I've watched kids die whispering for mothers they'd never see again. And every time I felt like giving up, I remembered men like him were still walking among us, quiet, alone, carrying all of it so we didn't have to. She looked Trey in the eye. You threw a drink. You laughed. And for what? Because he didn't talk. Because he didn't brag. Because he made you feel small. Trey tried to answer, but nothing came out. One of the off-duty MPs walked over to the bar, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. Security footage, he muttered to his partner. Everything's recorded. Rourke raised a hand again, calm, deliberate. No, he said. One word. It landed like stone on still water. The MP paused. Sir? No charges, Rourke said. But, Lena began. Rourke shook his head. He's already learning. Let him. Trey let out a shaky breath, as if someone had just given him permission to exist again. But no one reached out to him. No one comforted him. There was no redemption in that moment, only the long, slow road toward it. The Marine dad stood now beside Rourke. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a silver Zippo lighter, its surface scratched, but polished with care. This was my brother's, he said. Lost him in Ramadi. Rourke was the last to see him alive. He brought this back. Didn't say a word. Just handed it to me at his funeral. He placed it gently on the bar. I carried that pain alone for years. Thought silence meant indifference. Tonight I learned it meant respect. More people stepped forward. No speeches now. Just gestures. A battered coin placed beside the tags. A faded Polaroid, edges curled. A single, mud-caked bootlace tied into a loop. They formed a pile of memory, unofficial, unasked, undeniable. One of the off-duty MPs leaned in close to Trey. "You're lucky," he said. "Because he wouldn't raise a hand to you. But we're not him." Trey nodded quickly, his voice cracking. "I get it." "No," Lena said. "You don't. But maybe one day you will." The room quieted once more. The reckoning had passed. Not as a riot. Not even as punishment. But as a rebalancing of something sacred. The bar owner burst through the front door moments later, winded and wild-eyed. "What the hell happened here?" he asked. Dozens of eyes turned to him, and for the first time all night, multiple voices rose in chorus. He disrespected the wrong man. He threw a drink on history. He forgot what that stool represents now. But it was Lena who stepped forward and gave the clearest answer. Someone forgot who they were serving. The owner turned to Rourke, confused. "Is this true?" Rourke didn't answer. He simply stood. Slow. Measured. And adjusted the collar of his jacket. His recon patch caught the dim light. His face looked older than it had an hour ago. Or maybe it was just that now, everyone could finally see how much it had carried. The room shifted again, not with anger, but with reverence. "You heading out?" Sawyer asked. Rourke nodded once. "I've said what needed saying." "You barely spoke," Trey muttered. Rourke turned just enough to meet his eyes. Words aren't always the lesson. With that, he walked toward the door. Rain tapped gently against the windows. The jukebox screen faded to black. And outside, the street lamps flickered in the mist. Rourke paused before the exit. Looked once more at the crowd. And then disappeared into the night like smoke after fire. Lesson remembered.